Hey, what's up, everybody? Sam Dunn, back in the BangerTV environment for yet another review for me to bring to you. But before I get into it, let me give you a little mini update on all things in my metal world recently. First, we had yet another fantastic screening of our new documentary called The Ballad of Judas Priest at the Hot Docs Festival here in Toronto. We had a full house, lots of positive reviews, some laughter, some tears, everything you want from a great documentary, so thanks to everyone who came out for that. Also just recently announced the film is coming to the Sheffield Film Festival in June. Very excited to be back there. And last update before we get into the review, we've got a little something special coming your way. I sat down with Mark Morton from Lamb of God when the band passed through Toronto. We had a really great chat about the band and a whole bunch of other big life stuff, so can't wait for all of you to see that. But the real reason I'm here, the main attraction today, is to review this. Today I'm reviewing the new album from Swedish death metal legends At the Gates called The Ghost of a Future Dead that was released on April 24th on Century Media Records. The important thing to mention about this band for me is I've got a long history with them. They're friends. I'm great admirers of their music and have a lot of respect for what they've done over the years. I interviewed the now deceased lead singer Tomas Lindberg in his home in Sweden for Metal Evolution way back in 2010-ish. And then, of course, we did a full episode for Metal Evolution, the albums on At the Gates'. Does anyone not know about this record that watches this channel? Of course, 1995's Slaughter of the Soul. So my point in all that is that I've spent time with this band. I've spent a lot of time listening to this band and digging into their music and all the ins and outs. I do want to set the table about this band for anybody out there that doesn't know about the band's trajectory. So the band came up in Gothenburg, Sweden in the early 90s. They released a few records that were really kind of adding a different kind of sound to the extreme metal aesthetic, a little more progressive, a little more melodic, kind of a bit more black metal-y, but then of course when they hammered us all with 1995 Slaughter of the Soul on Earache Records, changed extreme metal forever. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But for me, their return album after many years away from the scene, that album is At War with Reality. For me, controversial claim, just about as good as Slaughter of the Soul. If that album had come out in 95, it still would have turned the entire metal world upside down. I've talked about that before. And then they released a couple more albums, which brings us to today's discussion about The Ghost of a Future Dead. And of course, the other critical thing that I need to add is that longtime At the Gates vocalist Tomas Lindberg passed away from cancer in September of last year. I'll get into the details of what that means for this record, but just to give you a little heads up on how I'm going to do this, it's a little bit different. I'm going to review the new album, but I'm also going to talk about Tomas and his vocals, and I guess in a sense, review him as one of the great extreme metal vocalists of all time. All right, and one more bit of context. So much context. I know I can't help myself. I'm going to be reviewing this record against At the Gates' other records. This is an important distinction. Not against other metal records around right now. And why? Well, because they've got a deep catalog. They made a massive impact. They are a wonderfully creative metal band. And I think on that basis, it just sort of seems fair to stack this album up against what they've done in the past. So yeah, that's how I'm going to do this. The album kicks off with the two advanced tracks that we heard prior to the release of the record, The Fever Mask and The Dissonant Void. Instantly hooked. For me, it had all the brutal yet beautiful hallmarks of At the Gates' music. The haunting melodies in the guitar, particularly in The Dissonant Void, for me is like goosebump classic At the Gates, the way they're able to mix the brutality and that sort of more ethereal sound. The Dissonant Void! The Fever Mask is just a wonderful, typical, just what you fucking want lead-off track for the album. But then, honestly, this is where it gets a little difficult for me. This is a band I've listened to for a very long time, so maybe I'm a little more judgy than on other artists. But for me, from that point on, the album seems to just kind of, to some extent, reproduce a lot of the conventions of the music that At the Gates has produced in the past, which, let me be clear, is all good stuff. I guess what I'm saying is I don't hear a lot of innovation on a lot of the tracks, not a lot of fresh ideas, albeit it still carries that hallmark sound that so many of us have grown to love. I don't know. My hypothesis is maybe it sounds like a record that was a little bit rushed, maybe, or maybe not as much attention put towards the details and the nuances of the transitions and the different layers that could be added to this music. And fair or not, I guess I just stack it up against At War with Reality, because that was that return record that kind of set in motion, you know, phase 2 of At the Gates. And that album for me was just like a holy fuck kind of record where it was like, wow, I couldn't imagine that a band that had created such a incredible record all those years ago could kind of do the same. So, you know, I'm judging it, I guess, against At War with Reality. And, you know, I guess overall, it just doesn't really stack up for me. There are, however, a couple of specific moments on the record that I want to draw attention to, which I think are moments which struck me as being a little bit different, pushing the sound ever so slightly, and really were cool ideas that they brought into this record. The first is the opening riff off of A Ritual of Waste. It's got this kind of more extended, slightly more dissonant, not like sort of in that familiar minor key pocket that we're used to with At the Gates. It's like a little bit of their progressive sound, but at full tilt. It's almost like an Opeth riff, but played to your classic kind of scissor thrash At the Gates beat. I thought that was a really cool opening riff for that song. other moment on the album I want to talk a bit about is this middle section in the deep cut, A Parasitical Hive. The song kind of breaks down with a melodic picking part on the guitar, and then there's this riff that comes up underneath it, which is almost like a slightly off-kilter Meshuggah-ish riff that for me, to my ears, really sounded like something cool and a bit different than what At the Gates has done in the past. Really liked it. Only critique is, and this is the best possible critique, I wanted them to milk it more, maybe take it away, bring it back. Maybe Jonas just played on the bass, like play with it a bit more. It almost felt like it would have made a super cool outro riff to the whole album. But hey, everyone's a critic, everyone's a music expert, right? But that's my taste, that's my opinion. So here's the hard part, the skull rating. This is my least favorite part of the whole fucking thing because, well, it's what you do when you review an album, and hey, it gives us something to, plant the flag in. I'm tough on this band because they are so fucking good. I'm tough on this band because I love them so much. We're toughest on the ones we love sometimes. So for me, because of all the stuff I said at the outset, this is an album that in the grand canon of At the Gates just is like, okay, great moments, a few good tracks, but just feels like a bit of sameness compared to what they've done in the past. So for the album, I give The Ghost of a Future Dead 3.5 skulls out of 5. But before you go, here's a little add-on. And really, honestly, this, I think, is the most important part of this review. Tomas Lindberg, for me, I'm saying it, might actually have been the greatest extreme metal vocalist of all time. Big statement. Scholdinger's up there. Tom Warrior is up there. David Vincent is up there. I could go on and on and on. But what I want to say about Tomas and why I think his particular approach to guttural vocals was so powerful is because he found the way to bridge that gap between extremity and legibility, listenability. Is that even a word? I don't care. He had the ability to retain the aggression that fit the music, yet there was something very distinct about his sort of like slightly higher register, blood-curdling tone that allowed him to really cut through the music. For me, it was just the fucking sweetest of sweet spots of how to deliver this kind of vocal. In addition to that, here was a man with a big mind, a lot of creative ideas, and a really good sense of pacing. And this may seem like we're in just fucking musicology 101 here, but the tendency, of course, in extreme metal is to be extreme about everything all the time. What I think Tomas did is he paced his vocals in a way that always let the music kind of be the main driver, and he was just in there with accents and beautifully placed phrases, which is really, I think, contributed to his, for lack of a better word, I can't believe I'm even using it, accessibility, because he knew where to put the vocals, just not how to do them and what to say. Not to mention the big concepts he grappled with. You know, he loved his surrealist literature. He loved to talk about the state of humanity. This was a guy who was a high school teacher and taught social studies, someone who thought deeply about the world and found a really creative, and here's the most important point, singular and unique way of how to bring those ideas into the milieu of extreme music like no one had done before.
I think I got that in somewhere in my backbone, the whole, you know, it's got to mean something. If you're going to sing about it, it can't just be, you know, bullshit, so to say. You know, it's got to, you know, someone will listen to this and someone, you know, why not try to say something important?
So at the risk of getting emotional, I miss this guy, a wonderful human, a genuine artist, and I put him up there with the other greats that we've lost, with Ozzy, with Lemmy, and with so many others, Ronnie, right? But Tomas, hear me out, is the guy that changed and elevated the game of extreme metal vocals, which we all know is this great dividing line in metal. How many people have you met where it's like, I like the music, but the singing, it's like, I can go with Dickinson, but this growly shit, like, it's not for me. Listen up. This is the guy to listen to. This is the gateway. Tomas Lindberg, rest in peace. You are one of the greats. We will always miss you, but thank you for all the music that you've left us with. I'm going to cherish it forever and pass it on to everyone at every moment that I can. So thank you, Tomas. You get my rating, my friend. 666 skulls out of 5, brother. Thank you for the music. Thank you for the passion. Thank you at the gates. We'll see you next time.